Hello, guys. This is Black and Indigenous American. Thanks for stopping by. And didn't do any live videos earlier this week. So today I had an opportunity. We got the natural light coming in. So I decided to go ahead and do that. I did post a few videos a few minutes ago from the powwow, the Nottoway Pow Wow in Surrey, Virginia. A few moments ago. So you can go ahead and check them out at your leisure. For some reason, the quality of those videos, when I transfer them when I transfer them from Facebook to YouTube, the quality is just not that great. But anyway, nevertheless, it was a successful weekend last week. Now the powwow is a 2-day powwow. But I only went on Saturday, and it was good. It was good. I didn't dance. I didn't do intertribal. I didn't do any of that stuff. And that's fine. But I did check out some vendors. They had some pretty good vendors. And, of course, the people there that's supposed to be there are definitely welcoming. I didn't see some people that vibe is low. I didn't see them this time. Maybe they went on Sunday. I don't know. But all in all, it was a really good day. The weather was gorgeous. Nice breeze. There were moments where it was warm, but nevertheless, it was a successful powwow compared to last year when it was canceled due to a hurricane. So can't complain, right? I didn't get a chance to see or talk, I should say. I didn't get a chance to talk to Chief Lynette, because sometimes I get to chit chat with her a little bit. But one thing about Saturday versus Sunday, Saturday powwows tend to be very, those who are hosting, let's just say, those people who are hosting, and in many cases, head lady and head man dancer and people like that, typically they are, you will not have their undivided attention. Let's just put it that way. Sunday, towards the end of the powwow, you have more interaction, more one-on-one with people that you want to catch up with and you haven't seen in a while. Yes, you see them on social media if they are on social media, but for the most part, you may only see them once a year at a particular event like a powwow. So a couple of people, associates that I've met over the years, I was able to really take time and talk with them. So that was nice. One of my friends, she's also a photographer, and she's currently in the process of all these powwows that she goes to. She's doing photo shoots in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women. MMIW. Again, that's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And so she asked me to be part of that photo shoot or whatever. And that was cool. But that is definitely one of many problems that plague Indigenous communities, is women are either murdered or they're taken into human trafficking or stolen into human trafficking. There's a young woman, Hatteras, that was murdered a few years back, and they have yet to find who did it, as far as having enough evidence to convict someone. Yeah, it's horrific, it's sad. And so this project pretty much was to continue to get that information out there where people are not complacent and only rely on the news, you know, national news or whatever for their news. And so things like that, we have to just be our own media for the most part. So for instance, I'm just going to read a little bit. Her name is Tracy, one of my buddies. She She says, for the first time, I will not be behind the lens at all times. At times, I will be stepping outside into the creative role and also providing as much information as possible. This is not a tribal thing, it's an indigenous thing. And we cannot afford to be divided on the importance of the lives of our grandmothers, mothers, sisters, daughters, nieces, wives, girlfriends, neighbors, and those we do not know personally. The thing I have been very proud of is the support of the men in our community. They have shown their support in their fight to protect us. No time for division on this issue. When we are divided on issues, we see how the government handles things. That is why we must stand strong and say no more. So anyway, that's Tracy. Her name is Tracy Y. Roberts. She is a well-known photographer in Virginia, I would say North Carolina. I'll also say Maryland. I'm not sure where else she does travel to powwows, but if you check out her Facebook page, it's called Tracy Yvette, that's Yvette Roberts. And Tracy is spelled Tracy. And her side gig is called Coconut Sage. So anyway, so she's doing this campaign, and it's just keeping us, even though when we go to powwows, you know, some people they're all about powwows. Well, sometimes you have to reach those people as well to remind them, okay, powwows are great, but at the same time, we need to remember our sisters, our mothers, our grandmothers, our nieces, our aunties who have been murdered and or missing. So I was happy to be a part of that. And so she did that Saturday and Sunday. And of course, Sunday I wasn't there. Sunday I left from the Williamsburg area with my love, and we drove down to Outer Banks for a couple of days. Like I mentioned in my last video, his surrogate father passed away. And so his surrogate father's wife is going through the mourning process, as you know, you would expect. But it's so fresh, you know, and when we walked in and he hugged her, they embraced or whatever, she just started crying. We sat there with her probably 5 or 6 hours, you know, and she had waves of emotions. 1 minute she was in tears, the next minute she was smiling. So I'm hoping that the time that we were there with her, it helped her cleanse. It helped her go through the mourning process. Like each day, you know, the reality sinking in about the physical presence of her husband not being here. But I did notice each day, because we saw her on Sunday when we got down there, because from Williamsburg down to Frisco, that might have been 3 hours, maybe, roughly. So it wasn't a bad drive. So we got there early enough where we could spend a significant amount of quality time with her. And by the second day, we went by again, and I noticed her energy, her being was more uplifted. Let's just put it that way. But when we first got there, she struggled. She definitely struggles. She has her moments where she doesn't want to be bothered. She doesn't want to talk, and it's understandable. But by the second and third day of us being there, she was keeping herself busy. And I think for some people, keeping yourself busy and focusing on the wants and the desires of their dearly departed, keeping that going, right? Keeping it going. So with her focusing on that and things of that nature, I think that helped her not soak in the sorrow, you know what I mean? But obviously, there's going to be days where she just don't want to get out of bed, and other days she has enough strength to get out the bed. But I don't think, when we were there, she said she really didn't leave the house except dealing with the funeral arrangements and things of that nature. You know, she's not ready to kind of be out. She would much rather be home. And again, to me, that's understandable, because if I'm upset, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want anybody either crying along with me or, you know, based on their belief system, using that as a way to soothe that person, whoever, whatever they're going through. And so, you know, that probably was best for her to just be home. But of course, people that care, they want to check in on her, make sure she's okay. And so I believe we were definitely a support system for the time we were there, checking in on her and just making sure she's okay. And of course, she has employees that work at the museum that, you know, they're in communication with her throughout the day anyway. So we can kind of like go through them, like, how is she doing? You know, what has she been talking about? Is she having a bad day? You know, that type of stuff. So in another, I guess, 5 weeks, we're going to head back down there. And that is going to actually be an honoring ceremony for my love's surrogate father. And one thing about him, he was not the type of person that wanted too much attention. You know, he didn't need, I mean, from what I've learned from the little time that I was around him and the community that knew him, he was very well known in the community. His personality would not want us to be waddling in sorrow. You know, he would want us to be like, okay, get to work, you know, keep working on whatever his vision was, right? So when we go back, there's going to be time to honor him in a way that's respectful, as far as Indigenous American in that region, because everybody does things differently, but in that region, how they will pay their respects to the dearly departed. And then throughout the day, we'll probably be doing things pertaining to the museum. And then later on that evening will be time to celebrate his life. And so that's going to be pretty much the whole weekend. So we're going to head back down there for that, to honor my love's surrogate father's life. And so currently I am in the process of possibly relocating again, but this time down in possibly, not sure yet, possibly near the museum on the island. And that in of itself is going to be an adventure. It's definitely going to be an adventure. So maybe a year from now, I would have possibly relocated down there. Wish me luck, right? Let's see. Now, one thing about that area, right? On the island, you have your storms, you have flooding, you have those elements that you have to really pay attention to, and you have to weigh your pros with cons of living in an environment like that. So like I said, it's very possible that I will relocate down there. One thing about moving down there, one will need to be very creative when it comes to currency, income, right? What I do now, I can technically do that online. I can technically work from home, but I'm not sure if my current employer will be comfortable allowing not just me, but anybody in their company to work remotely. So one thing I'm working on as far as universal laws and manifestation, all that, is to have an opportunity to stay with my same company and just work remotely. You know, a lot of those HGTV shows where people have either vacation homes and or they relocate to a beach resort or somewhere, and they can still work from home, looking out the window at the waves, you know, or at the beach or whatever like that. So if that is part of my cards, my life path to relocate to an island, it has a kind of like a isolated feel down there in that part of on that part of Outer Banks. It's very, in my opinion, very slow pace, borderline retirement vibe energy there. People are just, a lot of people that are locals there, whenever there's a storm, most of the time they don't leave. I understand why they don't, because it's such a hassle to get back to your residence to see what kind of damage you have, if any, and getting all squared away quickly versus just staying there and then being able to take care of the issue, whatever it is, as quickly as possible. Because if you have flooding in your house and you evacuated it, and it takes you a week or so to get back because the roads are not passable or whatever, then you can have mold sitting in your house almost 2 weeks, or water that's creating mold, right? And for people that been there, done that, been living there for years, you know, their entire lives or whatever like that, they take their chances, they stay. Unless, well, some people that are very old, they were like, well, if I just die, I just die. But everybody else, if it's like a category 3 and up, they'll evacuate. If it's like a category 2, they'll just stay, ride out the storm. And then again, whatever damage they have to deal with, they can deal with it promptly. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have to wait forever to be able to get back on the island to take care of something that if they were there, they could have took care of it before it created more of a financial hassle. So you got that. Now, personally, I have it my way. I will want to be in an X zone, flooding zone. That means there's a chance of flooding, but it's not the norm. For instance, living up on a ridge, higher elevation, right? Also, if I have it my way, it will be facing the sound side versus the ocean side. Because one thing about the landscape, you have like 3 different types of something in Outer Banks. You have the beach side, so the property that's right on the beach, pretty much sand. Then you have the brush, the side, grassy kind of side. Then you have the main land or whatever. And then you have the marsh side. The marsh side is pretty much on the sound side of the island. On the ocean side, you have more of the sand, right? So if I had it my way, I'll be more on the marsh side, but elevated up on a ridge where I don't need flood insurance or anything like that. So whenever there's flooding going on, it's not a big deal. Now, when Dorian went up the coast and the eye of the storm was over Buxton, actually a lot of the flooding, I think they said a lot of the flooding came from the ocean side, I think, not the sound. And again, people that are from there, they understand, like, however way the storm comes up, if it's coming up the sound, then it is not going to be a good day. If it comes up the ocean side, it could be a bad day, but apparently if it's coming up that sound side and you stay on the sound side, the marshy side of the island, you're going to get hit real hard. Another thing too is that people are more concerned about tornadoes, in a hurricane. So you can ride that storm and across the street, your neighbor house is demolished, but yours just has a little bit of wind damage, but you were in the same storm. And that's because the tornado must have touched down across the street versus your house. What gives me comfort is that you have a lot of houses down there that were built in the early 1900s and is still standing. They may not be the best looking houses down there. They may be weathered quite a bit down there, looks like like an old beach house, but at the same time, it gives me comfort knowing that house was able to withstand category whatever winds, and it was built in 1930 or whatever. So that gives me a little bit more comfort knowing that, you can build a house down there and it may have a little wind damage, but it's still standing. Yeah, right. So also one thing about living in a climate like that, you have salt, and that salt air and all that, it could do a number on your paint jobs in your house. So like every time I go down there, people with money, it doesn't matter. But every time I go down there, there's always somebody painting a house. There's always a house being painted. So people that don't want to waste a lot of money painting or getting someone to paint their house every single year, what they do is they just let the house weather. So a lot of the, houses, when you think of a beach house, you think of that wood that looks like if you walked across it, you would get a splinter. You know what I mean? They just let it be. And then eventually when you have to replace, let's say the steps or something like that, then they'll take care of it then and put new, I forgot what they call the siding of the house. That matches the steps, the color of the wood on the steps or whatever. But they'll just replace it all then. So I think it's unattractive. I would much rather have paint on the exterior, but it is what it is, because again, if you live down there, you have to take that in consideration, especially construction. If you work in construction and or AC heating industry, more so AC, you're going to make plenty of money. Because one thing about, again, that region with the sand and everything, it gets into your AC units and things of that nature. So you have to maintain it a lot more than, let's say, somewhere up here, right? In a DC, Baltimore, or whatever area. So you have to take that in consideration when you're going to live in an environment like that. There's plenty of vacation houses down there, plenty of rentals. You know, they call them McMansions, plenty of McMansions down there. But then you have to consider paying a company to manage your rentals, especially if you don't live there. So you have a rental property right on the beach, and you have to pay fees to management to take care of all of that, housekeeping, making sure you get paid, making sure they get paid. Well, there's tons and tons and tons of vacation mega mansions. That's what they call them. Also, when you're let's say if you want to just build a house down there, you're not filling the houses down there. You just want a custom built home. Well, if you purchase land down there, it depends. Everything is, it depends, right? It's not a cookie cutter way of doing things throughout the Outer Banks. It just depends what's going on with your particular lot. Sometimes you can get lots that are under $100,000 and maybe a half an acre, but you have to consider if you will have to do they call it filling or perk test, PRC test. You have to figure out if you have to fill in the land or whatever for a septic tank, and what I do for a living, I analyze plats and surveys all day, but I'm not analyzing it if you can build a house on it or not. All that stuff is done already. When you're dealing with a builder and developers, they already went through all that with the county, getting building permits and zoning and all that, right? So by the time I look at the plat, I'm only looking at if there's a title issue. Is there a gas line running through that property that if we don't bring that to someone's attention, that could cost our company a boatload of money. So things like that, when it comes to title insurance, like what is insurable and what is not insurable, that's what my team and we focus on. But now as a buyer or someone who's going to stay somewhere and you're looking at land, and that land, oh, it's a pretty good price. Oh, I like, the land and the water view or whatever. Okay, great. But is that land face value as is where you can actually build a house on it? Or do you have to do extra stuff to make it buildable? So again, you have your zoning laws. There's less restrictive zoning laws. I guess they call it upper neck of Outer Banks, like Nag's Head, Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil, what's the other place? Corolla, or whatever you want to call it, up there. There's less building restrictions, zoning laws. So you have more commercial businesses up there. You have more residential. Believe it or not, housing is cheaper up there versus further down south in the same county. But if you go further down Route 12, past Rodanthe, past Waves, past Salvo. These are villages that I'm mentioning, by the way. You get down to Buxton, you get down to Frisco. For what the typical person want in a house, it's more expensive. And I'm sitting here, I'm thinking to myself, why is it so expensive? It's so far away from the comforts of modern retail stores and things of that nature. You know, why is it that it costs so much more to live in that area? And so I was thinking, and it was brought to my attention as well, is that there's so much conservation areas within the Cape Hatteras area of the island. Most of that island is protected. And whatever is not protected, you either have residential or you have commercial. And in some cases, you have a mixture. And also in some rare cases, you have property that was grandfathered into the existing zoning laws. So you can see a bed and breakfast in the middle of a residential community, but it's technically a commercial property. It's not zoned for commercial, it's zoned for residential. But being that they're grandfathered in, they get a pass. Then you also have to think, okay, if you want to invest in, let's say, a bed and breakfast, and you're going to live in one of those rooms just to cut costs. If you're trying to get a loan to purchase it from the existing owner, the banks want to know the potential cash flow, potential profit that it made, even though it is zoned in a residential area. They want to know, okay, if you're going to continue to utilize this property for commercial purposes, we want to see the books. We want to see how they did financially within the last 5 years or so. They look at all of that. Then you have this, well, I'm going to buy this property and I want to use it as an Airbnb, right? So here is a $400,000 house. You can easily rent out space for short-term stay and bank that and put that towards your mortgage. Oh, but apparently that might not work either, because banks, they don't want to know potentially how much you can make. They want to know, okay, if you're going to if you're going to purchase a property that is an existing commercial business or whatever, they want to see, okay, well, here's history that this property was able to profit X amount of dollars, within the last 5 years. Because what lenders want to know is, how are you going to pay us? And how much of a risk are you based on dreams and fantasy or whatever like that? No, we want to know if this is an existing business, and if it is an existing business, how well did they do? And how much can you potentially make going forward? So we get paid. So you can look at a house that's out of your price range all you want, but if it's not already commercial property, they're not going to rely on your, well, I'm hoping to turn this section of house into Airbnb, or as some people call it, house hacking, to pay the difference on my mortgage. Now, for the most part, that's kind of tricky in some cases. So they want to already know what you got to offer now. Do you have your 20, 25, 30% down, right, for this loan? Will you have a job? Will you be an entrepreneur or whatever when you move down there? because a lot of people have to consider a harsh reality, at least for them, that just because you're moving down here and let's say you have money in the bank as far as savings, is there an ongoing financial flow coming in? You know what I mean? Like, okay, you got something in the savings, but there's no, income flowing. So you have to think about all of that type of stuff when you move into a place which I believe is borderline retirement / almost isolated. I wouldn't say totally off the grid. This is definitely not totally off the grid, but it's just things that you have to take into consideration. Hi, Roots. How are you? Thanks for chiming in. You say, hello, I saw the MMIW title and had to join. Just posted this on Twitter earlier. Okay. Yeah, I talked a little bit about that earlier in this video. I kind of moved on to the Outer Banks aspect of this video. But what I did mention was that I did attend the Nottoway Indian tribe of Virginia's Pow Wow. And one of my friends, she's doing this photo project or campaign. And she invited me to pose for this campaign. And it's just getting the message out there and not to rely on the national news to keep us up to date on what's going on or whatever. Because a lot of times they're not going to, as far as Indigenous Americans, they're not going to talk too much about it. And it's sad. And not just Indigenous American women, but even Indigenous American men going missing, being murdered. And it's as if they never existed. There's plenty of people, unfortunately, that are being murdered, be it by law enforcement, by gang violence, by, domestic violence, what have you. But yet, as far as national news, I don't know about local news, but national news, you rarely hear about it. It's as if they never existed. And see, me being Indigenous American as well as connections to Africa, Black, I do see more racial, how should I put this? I do see more of the racial instigative type scenarios, right? Black man being pulled over for a tail light or whatever, and end up he's shot in the head or something because he didn't move fast enough or he looked at the cop the wrong way. So, I mean, we do hear about those things. As far as the missing, people being abducted, be it human trafficking or what have you, or even murdered and their organs are being stolen. And who knows what happened to the body. It's horrific. It's disgusting. And so, again, this project that my friend Tracy is involved in, among other people too, we just want to continue to be our own media. We want to continue to not rely necessarily on national news to give us the news. Right. So yeah, I did talk a little bit about that earlier in this video, but I do thank you for chiming in, Roots. I don't know if you're interested in the whole Outer Banks talk or whatever, but that's what I'm talking about right now. And as far as Outer Banks, that is in Dare County, North Carolina. The reason why I mentioned Dare County, because I'm looking at the county website right now, and part of the slogan is Land of Beginning. land of beginnings. Now, again, I may relocate down to the Outer Banks. And part of the reason why is because my love has a connection there. Another thing is there's room to create a vision, because that section of Outer Banks, you can create something there and not be necessarily competition for another business there, if that makes sense. So there's some ideas, and I don't want to talk too much about the ideas, but there's some ideas, you know, back and forth brainstorming of what to do. But at the end of the day, this county, their slogan is called Land of Beginnings. I've learned over the years that that area, Buxton, Frisco, that area of North Carolina is the first English-speaking contact with Indigenous American people on this land. First English-speaking contact. A lot of people don't know that. And I just learned this a few years ago. But that county is where a lot of the colonization, at least in this country, is where a lot of that began. Now, we've heard about Roanoke Island, the lost colony of Roanoke Island, in so many different scenarios of what happened, right? But as far as contact, first contact, English speaking, it was Dare County in the Buxton and Frisco area of the Outer Banks. So, again, there are some brainstorming going on among myself and my love, and what we could do if I, he, us decide to relocate there. And I feel like there's potential to do something to honor ancestors, as far as that the three people, Indigenous American, Africans, and I would say English speaking, but that doesn't necessarily mean a specific country in Europe, but you know what I mean, like a European, English speaking European contact. Like I mentioned before, down in Hatteras village in the Outer Banks, at the very southern tip of that village, right where the ferry is, because the ferry will take you to Ocracoke if you choose to go to the next island in the Outer Banks. But the furthest tip of the Outer Banks before you have to get on a ferry is Hatteras Village. And once upon a time, there was this, I guess you can call it a boarding house, but they call it a hotel. It's called Hotel de Afrique. That's what it was called. And right now there is a marker, and I've mentioned this before. Yeah. I mentioned this before in the museum. It specifically says where that marker is, I think 1.5 miles west, like in the actual sound part of that region, is where the location of Hotel de Afrique was located. So right now I'm looking at Seaside Vacations. There's an article on here, and I'll read a little bit about it. But anyway, when I was introduced to this information, because one thing about Outer Banks, when you go down there, it's definitely a vacation spot for so many people. But when it comes to the locals, you don't see a reflection of indigenous and or non-white folks influence. Let's just put it that way. And so when that was brought to my attention, I was like, Hotel de Afrique? Really? Wouldn't that be awesome if there was a way where I could have some kind of boat that will sail to the location where that hotel, or I would call it it probably was a boarding house, where it was literally located. And people who want to give homage or want to give their respects and honor those who were there, have like an honoring ceremony right there on the boat, right over the actual location. So people that, care about that kind of history, which I do, and they seek it out, then we could have a demographic that will come down there and diversify the hell out of that area, if you know what I mean. Right? I feel like history must be shared. It must be taught. Correct history, so it doesn't get, repeated or whatever like that. But respect our ancestors. Respect that history there. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put this article in the chat box as well as the description box. The description box will be later, okay? I'm not going to do that right now, but I just posted the link to this article that I'm about to read real quick, so you guys can follow along if you choose to. But let me go over here real quick. Let's see. Okay. So it says, Outer Banks history. Hatteras Islands Hotel de Afrique. During a July the 31st commemoration ceremony in 2013, Hotel de Afrique on the Outer Banks, Hatteras Island officially became part of the Underground Railroad Network to Freedom. The network is a National Park Service program that was established for preservation and education efforts to protect historic sites around the nation that were instrumental in the Underground Railroad. As you may remember from grade school history class, the Underground Railroad was the name given to describe the network of people, routes, and safe houses used by Black slaves to escape the shackles of slavery in the South and migrate to the Union-controlled northern portions of the United States, right? So most people, if they've learned, U.S. history or whatever like that, they are aware of the Underground Railroad. At least we got at least one paragraph, possibly one page in the U.S. history books about it, okay? When Union forces overran the Confederate stronghold on Hatteras Island in 1861, hordes of slaves fled to the new safe haven on the Outer Banks. And let me stop you right there. Did anybody know anything about that? Because I know I didn't. I was born and raised in Virginia, and portions of North Carolina, I consider that home. My church home that I grew up in was in North Carolina. My dad's side of the family was from North Carolina. And this was the first time, I think a year ago, I found out about this. The first time that I heard about the safe haven in the Outer Banks for runaway slaves. Now that is sad. But whatever, as an adult, I choose to learn more about history. that was conveniently overlooked when I was a child or whatever. The free slaves would help Union forces load ships and build barricades in return for food and shelter. Located 1.5 miles east of the hotel's original location, the Hotel de Afrique Monument is situated directly in front of the present-day graveyard of the Atlantic Museum. Completed in the spring of 2012, the monument became part of the official Underground Railroad network during a ceremony in the summer of 2013. Crafted with black stone, the monument quotes a New York Times article from January 29, 1862, that states, quote, Captain Clark has erected a very commodious wooden house on the beach of the use of fugitives who have recently arrived from Roanoke Island. It is christened Hotel de Afrique. Franklin Tillett, the older man who last arrived, came down from Roanoke Island in a boat, bringing with him 15 of his household. They are very expert boatmen and are useful in pulling about the inlet and working along the shore. End quote. The original site of the hotel is now washed over by decades of strong storms and hurricanes. Originally consisting of 12 buildings, Hotel de Afrique was the largest structure out of the dozen. Today, the area is nothing more than overgrown vegetation and rolling sand dunes with portions of the site now underwater. I encourage you to stop by the outdoor monument located in front of the maritime graveyard of the Atlantic Museum, located on Hatteras Island, when passing by. The museum is open year-round with hours varying seasonally. And that was the article. And again, I posted the link in the chat box, so those who are watching live now can check it out, or you can just wait and get the article later. But yeah, so when I learned about that, I'm like, oh, really? Why is it that I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. The reason why I get it, because whenever there's anything to do with people who are not European or whatever in this country, it's always downplayed. It's always, it can be something exceptional, and it's either counterfeited or it's downplayed. It's as if, how dare you do anything with excellence? So we're gonna whitewash it, and or we're gonna ignore it like it never happened. We're just gonna ignore it. It doesn't matter. We don't have to repeat that. We don't have to share that information. We don't. We don't have to do none of that. But yet the county slogan is Land of Beginnings. Land of Beginnings. And it was literally considered a safe haven for runaway slaves in the state of North Carolina. Literally. So that caught my attention, long story short. So I'm like, okay, that's something I can relate to. What else is there? What else is there on that island that I can relate to besides the indigenous population? Because again, there is a Native American museum in Frisco. And so that I can connect to as well, right? Out of the entire Outer Banks, there's only one museum that honors Indigenous American people, and not just the Indigenous American people from that island or from the Outer Banks, but just generically throughout the United States. With regards to other non-white people, there's this Hotel de Afrique that I just found out about. Of course, there's Roanoke Island, like Manio, has a large Black population there. And I mean, you can do whatever you want with the term Black. But as far as Outer Banks, there's I've talked about Richard Etheridge before, and he was one of the lifesavers. He was a leader down on the Outer Banks. There's a bridge that was just recently named after him that I crossed over last weekend. That kind of stuff you rarely hear about unless you dig in deep to try to find that information. Again, if I relocate to the Outer Banks, and that's a big if it works out for my love and or both of us to relocate, we're going to diversify the hell out of the area that we reside in. I know some people want to get away and go on vacation and not deal with the troubles of other people's baggages. And I'm saying this very nicely right about now. Is there a way to escape from having to acknowledge or having to face the beginnings of trauma for other people? When they're on vacation, they don't want to see that. They don't want to hear that. Just like the whole kneeling down during a football game. That's a reminder of issues and problems that stem from a group of people that they possibly may be related to or in a category with them. They don't want to be reminded of that. This is a ball game. This is entertainment. We want to be entertained later for all that. So when people escape and go to places like the Outer Banks, that's their way to escape from the harsh reality. And I'm the same way in a certain way. Like when I go on vacation, I don't want to see people like starving, you know? But at the end of the day, there are people there that are starving and you are on vacation, enjoying your week or 2 weeks or whatever, and you don't want to see that. But when I go down to Outer Banks and I see people who are benefiting and enjoying themselves, and I don't see reflection of people that I relate to enjoying themselves. It's almost like a private club, like an unspoken private club, like certain people go down there. And if you ain't part of that clique, you just look like you're out of place. Well, guess what? I am Indigenous American. I'm in the East Coast equation. My roots are deep in Virginia and North Carolina. I'm not sure about Outer Banks indigenous populations that were there, and some are still there, but they kind of blended in with everybody else. But my roots are in that state, and my recent roots are in Virginia. And I go where the hell I want to go. And I plant my roots where the hell I want to plant my roots. And if it's if it's part of my life blueprint to live somewhere like that and diversify the hell out of it, so shall it be. And whoever don't like that, they can pack up and relocate somewhere else. Now, of course, no one has been directly insensitive or negative or, you know, just straight up hateful towards me. But you know, guys, if you got intuition, if you got the gift of discernment, you know if there's an area where you feel comfortable, and you know when you walk into a place or you go to a particular region and you don't see a reflection of yourself and you're kind of stared at, not like 1930s kind of rudeness, but it's almost like there's a reason why we come down to Outer Banks. There's a reason why we don't go to Myrtle Beach. You know where I'm getting at, right? But at the end of the day, you know, it is what it is. So I was looking at one YouTube video, and it had something to do, this author was talking about her book, and what she wanted to do was to do some research on restaurants that are not necessarily in business now, but they once upon a time they were in business in their Outer Banks, and she wanted to learn more about those restaurants. However, she noticed throughout her research, in the era that she was brought up in, certain people couldn't eat at certain restaurants. However, they worked in that area. So where did they eat? Did they have their own restaurants? And it kind of, she went down this rabbit hole, right, of doing all this researching and stuff. So what I want to do is I want to see if I can find that video. And if I can find a video real quick, I will put that in the description box as well as the chat box, so you guys can, oh, I found it. So you guys can check it out another time. But it's called and again, this is just me being me, researching the hell out of a region so I can feel comfortable about possibly relocating there and what I can do with it and how I can be creative in making a place my own, and how I can contribute to the community, even if some people may be uncomfortable with my presence. But at the same time, I came across this video, and it's pretty much the author's talking about the book. It's called Lost Restaurants of the Outer Banks. And when she, within like 10 minutes of this video, when she had an aha moment, and she was learning more and more about the non-white restaurants and non-white communities, and how it all just unfolded, you know. And she did a lot of her footwork. She did a lot of her research. She met with different people, and, you know, she was talking about the publisher wanted the direction of the book to be uplifting, and for the most part, probably, and I could be, you know, I could be looking too much into this, but probably they just wanted an uplifting book about, you know, the old restaurants in the region and what made them so great, and why are they not in business now, and not so much about the white black thing. Well, you know what? If it exists, then we wouldn't be talking about it, would we? If there weren't barriers put in place, and in some cases still in place in certain areas, we wouldn't be talking about it. It wouldn't be an issue. So she had a conviction in herself, in her core, that she was like, no, tiptoe around this topic and only focus on the Brady Bunch version of her research. She wanted it to be as authentic and as transparent as possible. So anyway, again, I just put the link in the chat box for those who are watching and want to check it out later. And then later, I will put it in the description box after this video, so you guys can check it out. But anyway, when I was watching this video, I said, okay, yeah, that's nice. Because when you go down the Outer Banks, especially when you get past Nag's Head, you have very few options when it comes to restaurants. And with me, I will have to learn to be more self-sufficient in my own kitchen and not to rely on restaurants and things in retail and things of that nature down the street, right? So when I came across this video, I said, yeah, I would like to know, like, where are all these restaurants? And I want to know, whatever. And then that's when it got deep in history and the discrimination and all of this stuff. So I think it was beneficial. And also there was a significant focus on Manio in Roanoke Island. And that's where you're going to find a significant Black community or communities on that island, Roanoke Island. I doubt if it's just Black people, but some people, they want to put a label on folks, and then if you got any kind of Black in you or any kind of kink in your curl, then they just throw you in the Black category. But there was a lot of mixing going on. But the point is, the labeled Black community or Black communities that's near the Outer Banks, it was on Roanoke Island. So she did highlight that as well. No, not at all, Roots. You said not much plant-based options down there. Nope, not at all. And so whenever I go down there, I've found 2 places, actually 3 places. One in Avon called Oceana Bistro. They do have a dish. It's a vegetarian flatbread or whatever. So that's pretty good. So whenever I go down there, I always go to Oceana Bistro in Avon Village. And it's called a flatbread something, vegetarian flatbread. So that's pretty good. Another place that I go to is in Buxton. It's called Buxton Munch. And I usually get a vegetarian wrap. And it's loaded with beans and corn and all of this stuff in this huge wrap. And the wrap I get is like a tomato. I guess that's what they call the wrap itself. It's tomato wrap or something. And it's a huge, big old burrito. And it's so good. And that's kind of another option I have. Of course, there's a couple of pizzerias. There's one in Avon called Nino's. And then there's one in Buxton called Giannia or Gina or whatever. They have pretty good pizza. I would say, I would get cheese pizza sometimes to kind of, get through. And then, let me see. Then there is a little small deli kind of shop between Frisco Village and Hatteras Village. And that one is called, let me see. Let me check that one out, because I just tried that, not this past weekend, but back in April. Was it April or was it last October? Might have been April. And I discovered that one. And let's see, I think that was in Hatteras Village. Okay. Yeah, it's called Cat's Deli, K-A-T apostrophe S, Cat's Deli. And it's actually a pretty good little spot. And I was able to get like a veggie wrap. So, but again, you're in the Outer Banks. You're surrounded by water. So the main thing that's going to be on the menu is going to be fish, seafood. So for people who love seafood, that is food heaven for them. Because most of the time they're getting fresh fish or whatever. There's this one restaurant in Frisco called was it Sunset Bar? Sunset, what's it called? Because I ate there Monday night when I was there. Sunset and Grill or something like that. And they're known for their seafood. A lot of people like that. They like that restaurant. But yeah, back to your original comment, Roots, when you said there's not much plant-based options. It's not. But again, Buxton Brunch, they're pretty good. It's funny because whenever I go there, a lot of people, like the crowd or the demographics that are attracted to that, they look like they just went surfing or they're about to go surfing. People that care about the environment, people that care about animals, you know, kind of that hippie kind of look to them. But at the end of the day, the vibe there is inviting. And the first time I actually dined in was Monday. But typically I'll just go there, order it, and take it out. Yeah, it is a challenge, Roots, for someone like myself that that need to eat, but there aren't that many restaurant options for me. But I look at it this way: on the flip side, if I do relocate there, and that's a big if, I will learn how to be self-sufficient in my own kitchen. I don't have to worry about someone not washing their hands properly or not fixing the food properly or fixing my food on the same grill as they just fried up a beef or pork or whatever. You know, sometimes they use the same grill. I make my own food. It's just me getting a habit of using my kitchen for me becoming more self-sufficient and not relying on outsiders to feed me. But yeah, when you're on vacation, typically you will much rather go out to eat. Again, further north, like Nag's Head, Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil, up there, that region. Even on Roanoke Island, there's more local and chain restaurants. But when you go further south on that, in the Outer Banks, right? Cape Hatteras Island, you know, all of that. When you go further south, there's less options. And so one of my options when I went down there is I just went by the food line in Avon, went by food line and bought a couple of frozen dinners that were pretty much like a veggie bowl. You can get like Healthy Choice or whatever brand, Amy's. And then, you know, I just put it in the freezer, and then I want it, I'll just pop in the oven and or the microwave. However, I'm with someone, whenever they go down there, that all they want to do is eat out. And they have so many options because they love seafood, right? But for me, it's a challenge. And another thing, as far as relocating to, let's say, the Outer Banks further south, many of those local businesses, in particular local restaurants, they close early, or they're not even open at all, depending on the day of the week and or the season. So if you're going to relocate down in an area like that, you're definitely going to have to be self-sufficient in your own kitchen. So that's kind of the trade-off, you know, living on an island that's a bit more secluded, I guess you can call it. Now, again, there's plenty of people that live there, but being that on the Cape Hatteras, that island, You have Buxton and you have Frisco. And then you have Hatteras Village. So Buxton Village, Frisco Village, and Hatteras Village, they all share the Cape. If you look at the map of North Carolina, Outer Banks, you have that Cape, and it's a large chunk of land. But most of that land is preserved, is protected, so you can't build on it. And whatever areas you can build on it, depending on the level, depending on the elevation, depending on a whole laundry list of things to even build on it. It could be pricey. And I'm sitting there looking at houses in Rodanthe. I'm looking at houses in Avon. I'm even glancing at Nags Head where everything's at, right? So much cheaper than moving further south in the Outer Banks. And part of it's because there's a lot of land that either A, doesn't make financial sense to put a lot of money into trying to make it livable or buildable, right? Or you just can't build on it. So some people will buy property and the use, the property use for buying it could be putting a barn on it or growing sweet potatoes or something, right? But when it comes to building a house or commercial property where you have to have some kind of, you have to take in consideration this sub pump, the sewer tank and all that. You got to consider all of that. So yeah, you definitely have to take all of that in consideration. Not only that, but you also have to take into consideration the way the wind blows. And the way the wind blows, it would determine which side of the house you should have special windows. What kind of material you should be using in and around on your house. Apparently, cedar wood, it weathers well in that climate. It ain't necessarily cheap either, but the cedar wood is more suitable for that area. So you can't take a house in Charlotte, North Carolina, the same blueprint material and everything, and have the exact same blueprint in the Outer Banks. It's not going to work. That's why, from my research, it's wise to utilize a local builder. And one thing I've learned about, just the real estate there in general, because I've done my homework, right, looking, just because you have this one subdivision called, let's say, Sunset View, let's just call it that, Sunset View. Every other house looks totally different from the other house. And you may not have HOA or HOA fees. So even though everybody's living in this one community called Sunset View, that doesn't necessarily mean that all the houses that were built in the neighborhood were the same builder or the same style house. It's not cookie cutter at all. So if you're the type of person that wants your house to look like everybody else's house, maybe the front door is a different color, but it's the same, the same blueprint. No. Most of the houses, if not every single house in the Outer Banks, in particular, south of Nags Head, they are custom for the most part. Now you do have the modular flat, I think they call it flat homes or something, which you put on pilings, as they call it. It's like almost like stilts, because you got to elevate your house so it doesn't get flooded, especially if you're in a marsh area or you live directly on a beach, because you have a lot of beachfront properties where they have to be on stilts and also known as pilings. So you can raise it up. So whenever that water comes through, and it will come through, your house is not flooded. Okay. You got to think about all that. All of that. Like my builder, my employer, the closest neighborhood they have that they build in, and this is new construction because I work for a new home builder. It's in Let me see, where is it? It's near the Chesapeake area. It's in North Carolina, but it's near the Chesapeake area in Virginia. Let me see. So it's in the Hampton Roads area. That's the region. If you go to the website, you know, even though this property I'm about to look at is technically in North Carolina, it's actually marketed on the website under Hampton Roads region. So this property is called Lakeview, upper 200,000s for a smack brand new house. And coming from the mindset of Northern Virginia, DC, metropolitan area, upper 200,000s for a single family house, smack brand new, is cheap. This same house up there near DC would run you probably like $500,000 or $600,000, if not more. So this property is in Moyock, North Carolina. That's Moyock. And I have being an employee, I have a benefit. If I were to purchase one of their homes, I'll either get $30,000 off the sales price or 10, I think it's 10% of the sales price. So it can't go over $30,000. That's the cutoff. So, but the criteria that I've been given based on my love's criteria or wants or whatever, it is Dare County. It is Cape Hatteras, and it's either between Buxton or Frisco. Ain't no in between, ain't no trying to get around that. It's just, it's kind of like talking to the wall. Because when someone has something in their core, in their spirit, or what they're supposed to do, and their purpose in their life, or whatever chapter of life they're in, and it's that calling they have, you're better off just going with it. Whatever that calling is, you're better off just going with that calling. And that's your purpose. That's your life's blueprint. And for whatever reason, that is his purpose. And again, the slogan of this county is Land of the Beginnings. So that's all I got to say with this particular video, guys. I talked a little bit about missing and murdered Indigenous women. I talked a little bit about the history in Outer Banks as far as non-white folks, and how I want to expand on that. I want to be able to possibly create a space for that kind of history, to elevate that history, to get it out there. To be almost like a safe haven for those who want to travel down to the Outer Banks and have a place where they feel comfortable. You never know. I don't know. But what I do know is, if that's where I'm supposed to be, if that's a space where I need to create, not only for myself, but to also enlighten and empower other people, to highlight that history, and be more of a partner with my love in that endeavor, then I'll be in Outer Banks. We shall see. But anyway, thanks guys for watching. For those who've been watching the entire time, for those who came in and left, for those who will watch this later after it's posted, I appreciate you. I thank you. And be blessed. Be a blessing to others. Until next time, toodles.